Hello everybody and welcome to Gene's Reviews from a regular dude, where I do trailer reactions, I react to YouTube videos, I review YouTube channels, occasionally I'll review a movie, but really, I just do whatever the hell I want. Hello everybody and welcome to Gene's Reviews from a regular dude. Down in the basement, 5 lucky breaks that finally solved cases from top 5 unknowns. I like stuff like this, especially when there's closure to it. I don't like the mystery stuff that as much, where you don't have any closure to it, you know. So these are 5 lucky breaks that finally solved cases.
It's very often the case that cases go unsolved due to a lack of evidence, and the criminals responsible are never brought to book. But every now and then, criminals are brought to justice thanks to clues that were found purely by chance. Number 5. In July of 2012, a group of students were visiting England and stumbled upon a horrific discovery in the seaside area. What they at first thought was just a pink shower curtain that had been disposed of in a trash bin turned out to contain the partial remains of a body. 3 days later, a pair of legs were found in the same location on the same beach. Pathologists could not determine how the man had met his end. However, the remains were identified as belonging to a 30-year-old man named David Guy from South Sea. Marks found on David's torso led police to believe that he'd been the victim of a sustained and violent assault that had taken place between June 30th and July 3rd, 2012. Then, a year later, a man named David Hilder contacted police and told the operator that he'd like to speak to someone, as he thought he had done something and that he'd found a lot of empty Nurofen wrappers in his pocket. The operator asked if he needed an ambulance, but Hilder
What's Nurofen? Never heard of it.
Insisted that he speak to the police first, as he thought he might have killed someone. PC Stephen Miles met with Hilder outside of the police station. He looked disheveled, dirty, and very confused. He stated that he didn't know exactly what he had done and was taken into the station to be questioned further. Here he told police that he was having flashbacks to something that he may have done, and that if he had indeed done what he thought he had, he would commit suicide. After questioning, Hilder was taken to the hospital for a possible overdose, but returned to his apartment, which, when searched by police, turned up with nothing suspicious. Upon hearing this, Hilder was relieved and remarked, "It must have all just been in my head." Police then learned that Hilder was in fact connected to David Guy, as they lived near each other and were known to be friends with a love-hate relationship, often turning violent after they'd been drinking. On July 8th, Hilder was arrested for the murder of his friend, though he denied any involvement. During his trial, Detective Superintendent Dick Pearson described how he'd found cat hair on the shower curtain used to conceal Dave Guy's body. These follicles were sent to the US for analysis, and it was found to belong to Hilder's cat, Tinker, which sealed his fate, and thanks to his cat, Hilder was sentenced to a minimum of 12 years in prison.
Yeah, sounds to me like he has schizophrenia or something like that. He'd be better off in a institution or something like that, where he can maybe get some help, get on some medication.
Hilder was sentenced to a minimum of 12 years in prison. Number 4. Albert Fish lived from 1870 to 1936 and was suspected of at least 5 murders during his lifetime. However, he claimed that his number of victims totaled near 100.
1870 to 1936, 66 years old. He looks pretty rough for 66 years old. I'm 60. I don't know, do I look that rough? I don't think I look that rough.
He came to be known by many names, such as the Gray Man, the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Brooklyn Vampire, the Moon Maniac, and the Boogeyman. Fish came from a family riddled with mental disorders, ranging from an uncle who was diagnosed with mania, a sister Annie, who had what was only known as mental affliction, and a brother who was confined to a mental institution. 3 more of his relatives suffered from mental disorders, and his mother was afflicted with auditory and visual hallucinations. In 1890, Fish showed up to New York, where he became a street worker at first, but by 1898, he worked as a house painter. In 1903, he was arrested and convicted of grand larceny, for which he spent time locked up in Sing Sing prison, all the while hiding the fact that he committed far more heinous crimes. Fish's wife left him for another man called John Strobe in 1917, taking virtually all of their possessions with her and leaving Fish to care for their 6 children on his own. At this point, he too began to have auditory hallucinations and is reported to, on one occasion, have wrapped himself up in a carpet, according to him on instruction from John the Baptist. After several more disturbing but undetected crimes, Fish ended up in Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital for observation. In 1928, Fish anonymously sent a letter to the parents of a girl who had gone missing, the contents of which are gruesome to say the least. The family of the missing girl contacted police, who noted that the envelope featured an emblem with the letters NYPCBA, which was short for the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. A janitor from that company told police that he'd stolen the stationery and had taken it to his apartment where he no longer lived. The landlady of that address confirmed that Fish had been staying there, but had moved out just days before. When Fish returned to collect the check sent by his son, he was met by police, who, after disarming him, took him into custody. The list of crimes attributed to Fish is staggering, and he was ultimately executed in Sing Sing in 1936.
That's crazy how, it can be your whole family. Like the mother had mania, the father had problems, the whole family. The sister had problems, and then him also. Just bad genetics.
Number 3. Another extremely disturbing individual, Peter Curtin, would eventually be dubbed the Vampire of Dusseldorf. Although he was arrested and convicted for a range of crimes ranging from between fraud, attempted murder, desertion from the Imperial German Army, and arson, his far more sinister crimes took place between 1899 and 1930, and were at first not attributed to him, as he kept changing his method of attack and the types of victim that he pursued. By 1929, the Vampire of Dusseldorf was making headlines in press around the world, with police and the press suggesting that the crimes were being committed by more than one individual, due to the variety of weapons used and the diversity of the victims. By the end of that year, police had accrued over 13,000 letters from the public, interviewed 9,000 people, pursued over 2,600 clues, and compiled a list of thousands of potential suspects. In 1930, Curtin anonymously sent a map to a local communist newspaper detailing where he had left his 2 victims. Handwriting analysis led police to believe that the same person had previously written to them, leading them to another unfortunate victim. In May of that year, a man approached Mariah Budlick and an unidentified man while they were arguing and asked her whether the man was pestering her. She said that he was, and the man promptly left, not knowing that the man who had just come to her assistance was in fact Peter Curtin. Peter would later attack her in the nearby woods, but let her go when she started screaming. Budlick didn't report this incident to police, but wrote a letter to a friend in which she described the attack in detail. She had, however, addressed the envelope incorrectly, which caused a post office clerk to open the letter in order to find the correct address. Upon reading its contents, he sent the letter to police, who interviewed her and convinced her to lead them to Curtin's home, where his landlady confirmed his identity. When a substantial reward was offered for his capture, Curtin's wife contacted police, informing them that she was to meet with him later that day, where he was subsequently arrested. He confessed to being the Vampire of Dusseldorf and was executed in July of 1931.
That's really, really weird because looking at him, he's so unassuming. I would not think twice about someone like that, and I wouldn't be scared at all. But I'm not a female. Still, he just doesn't look like a threat.
Number 2.
I think he's just evil.
Mike DeBartolomeo was born in Arkansas to a military family, with his father serving as lieutenant in the U.S. Army in Washington after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and his brother later became a paratrooper. The family would move frequently, relocating to Texas, Kentucky, Frankfurt, Germany, and the Netherlands before moving back to New York in 1953. Mike was a loner as a child, preferring his own company while sketching in his room, an activity that helped him escape the abuse that was dealt by his father. By 1956, age 16, he'd grown to hate his mother, threatening her with a letter opener and on one occasion with a hatchet, causing both of his parents to become fearful of him. Later that year, he was arrested for possessing a concealed firearm, only the first of many arrests that would include charges such as kidnapping, attempted murder, attempted robbery, auto theft, and many more. Early in the 1980s, the U.S. Secret Service was investigating a spate of counterfeiting cases that would ultimately lead them to Mike DeBartolome and the terrible crimes that he had committed. The counterfeiting crimes seemed to form a geographical pattern, and composite sketches were handed out to store clerks that worked in areas where they would likely be hit next. This proved to be the undoing of Mike, and upon his arrest, police found more counterfeit $20 bills in his car, along with the names of cities in which the fake money was to be used. While searching for counterfeit equipment used by Mike, police found disturbing photos depicting crimes being committed against women, with some of them showing Mike's face. It was later found that the photos where his face was visible were of women he disposed of, while those where his face was covered were victims that he set free. Mike was arrested and chose to represent himself in court, eventually being sentenced to 375 years in a federal prison.
Another one.
Number 1.
I'll say it all stemmed from the abuse from his father or whatever. But I know people that grew up with their father that beat them and stuff like that, and they went just the opposite way. So I don't know. Guess it depends on how
On the
strong
13th of November 2000, Dariusz Genesreviews from Poland had a meeting with a customer who was interested in procuring the advertising services offered by Genesreviews' company. He left the office alone, according to witnesses, and met with 2 individuals who were waiting for him outside, with whom he left. In December of that same year, Genesreviews' body was found in the Odra River, tightly bound in a backward cradle. The cause of death was ruled to either be strangulation or drowning. Despite police investigations, the case was eventually closed in 2000 due to no perpetrators being found. 18 months later, an investigator with the police department reviewed the files of Genesreviews' case and noted that his phone had never been found. This led him to start a new line of inquiry, finding that the phone was still in use, although it had been sold several times. The first sale of the phone was traced to a Polish auction site called Allegro on November 17, 2000, 4 days after his disappearance. The seller was found to be a user named Chris B7, who, upon further investigation, was found to be Christian Bala, who'd written a novel called Amek, published in 2003. When attempting to interview Bala, police learned that he was traveling in Asia and would have been unable to commit this crime at the time. In the meantime, they checked his background and learned about his blog, also named Amek, where he posted fragments of his novel, which were later described as creepy and sadistic. Police decided to read the novel and discovered that it contained many parallels to the death of Genesreviews, the most prominent being the rope that was used. Later, they would discover that a phone card used to phone Genesreviews at his office was also used to call Bala's parents and his girlfriend. When interviewing Bala's wife, she revealed that she'd had a brief affair with Genesreviews, which Bala was very likely aware of, providing him with a motive. Bala was arrested upon his return to Poland in 2005 and initially claimed that he'd never heard of Genesreviews. Later, he confessed to his murder, but later recanted. At trial, he was eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison in a case that is still considered to be the most spectacular case in Polish judiciary history.
He only got 25 years in prison? I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff. Those were 5 things that I had never... Well, I had heard of a couple of them. There was a couple I heard of. The vampire guy I had heard of, and Albert Fish. I knew who Albert Fish was. How about another joke? Another one from Mitch Hedberg. I'm against picketing, but I don't know how to show it. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hashtag Mean Gene, all that fun stuff. And if you like this video, tell all your friends, leave a comment down below. And if you didn't like it, then just shut up. And I will see you next time.